Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the speaker series. If this is your first time joining us, a special welcome to you as well. I'm Joel Capejan, Director of CERC, the Center for Enhancing the Research Capacity of Minority Serving Institutions at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. CERC is funded by the National Institute of Justice, NIJ, and our mission is to help researchers build the skills, network, and support needed to develop a strong, competitive, and actionable research agenda. We believe that the main driver of this is external funding. This is why we have set this speaker series this year to be a practical roadmap to the grant writing process, from shaping the idea to building a proposal to budgeting and planning what comes next after the funder's decision. Last week, Professor Hung-En Son from John Jay College walked us through the grant proposal roadmap. If you missed that session, we'll share the link of the recording during today's session. You can also join our mailing list or visit our website to access links to all presentations in the series, as well as to see what's coming next. Today, we have an outstanding session lined up for you. But I'll now turn it over to Professor Joshua Fradlick, co-director of CERC and host of the speaker series, to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Fradlick?
Thanks, Dr. Capejan. I just want to reiterate, as Dr. Capejan said, that we're very excited about the center and its potential, as well as the speaker series in today's session. And of course, we're very grateful for NIJ for their support to make it possible. So this is the second session of the Spring 2026 CERC Speaker Series. As noted, my name is Joshua Fradlick. I'm the co-director of CERC, and I assist Dr. Capejan. So today's session is titled Finding External Funding Opportunities in Criminal Justice. And our presenter is our colleague and friend, Dr. Matthew DeMichele from RTI International. Like last week, today's session is 90 minutes. It will last until 1 p.m. Dr. DeMichele will present for around 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have around 20 to 25 minutes moderated question and answer session. You can submit your questions via the question box. Our center managers, Justice Evans and Oreen Ali, will organize the questions, and I will then present them to Dr. DeMichele at the end of his talk. Just one other quick point is, at the end of today's talk, everybody is going to receive a brief post-event survey. Please respond to it. Our purpose is to get valuable feedback so we can make improvements and enhance our future programs and offerings. As noted, today the featured speaker is Dr. Matthew DeMichele. Dr. DeMichele is a senior director and research sociologist at RTI International. He has worked there for nearly 14 years, leading large, externally funded research initiatives in criminal justice and public safety. Very relevant for today's talk, Dr. DeMichele has secured and managed over $50 million in research external funding from local, state, federal, and private foundations. His federal collaborators include the Department of Homeland Security, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, Bureau of Justice Assistance, NIJ, the National Institute of Justice, and the National Science Foundation, among others. He's also led major research and evaluation efforts funded by both the MacArthur Foundation and Arnold Ventures. Prior to RTI, Dr. DeMichele spent 9 years as a researcher with the American Probation and Parole Association, and he developed research, training, and technical assistance initiatives focused on community supervision and public safety. Dr. DeMichele's work spans pretrial practices, community supervision. He's looked at extremist disengagement, criminal justice data modernization, and done policy-relevant evaluation. He's also completed policy briefs, technical reports, and published manuscripts in some of the leading outlets in our field of criminal justice, including Criminology and Public Policy, Justice Quarterly, and the American Sociological Review. It's my pleasure now to turn it over to Dr. DeMichele.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Josh. I appreciate that introduction. I have to start taking you everywhere I go. It's very complimentary. No, in all seriousness, really excited to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to get to participate in the speaker series, and so I'm really grateful to have this opportunity today. And like Josh and Joel were saying, I'm going to talk a little bit about finding external funding opportunities in criminal justice. And I'm going to talk for, yeah, probably about 40 minutes or so. And so hopefully we can have some conversation afterwards with some questions, and hopefully you find the talk helpful. All those things I can do. Can I advance the slides? There we go. Okay. Session goals for today. So the goal of the session today is to really try to equip faculty and pre-award grant officers to discover, vet, track, and to strategically select criminal justice funding streams that align with your personal research interests as well as your university or institutional priorities. Here, I'm going to offer a few kind of practical tools and some collaborative strategies. And these are really things that are based on my own experience. I think, like Josh said, I've been, working in a few different institutes over the last 25 or so years where we are focused on external funding. So at RTI International, we are 100% funded by grants, contracts, cooperative agreements. We do not have an endowment, and I'm not at a university where we have, student tuition as part of our revenue stream. We are, like I said, 100% funded by, soft money, if you will, or external funding. And then by the end of today's session, I hope to give you some actionable frameworks for navigating the complex funding landscape, as well as kind of giving you a little bit of suggestions on building sustainable partnerships and developing a long-term competitive advantage and securing external support for your research. I wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit to kind of recognize the context and the reality of grant seeking, for criminal justice studies, as well as for criminal justice faculty and grant officers that may be facing unique challenges when pursuing external funding. That a lot of departments operate with significant constraints that make grant writing particularly demanding and challenging. Here I've identified three, and you may have, others as well, but heavy teaching and service loads. If you're juggling a 3, 4 course load, if you're on a lot of committees and have a lot of maybe advising or service responsibilities, those are going to kind of conflict with grant writing. So we're going to talk about some strategies to deal with that. As well as sometimes at some universities, there's limited pre-award infrastructure. And so, some departments, may not have a dedicated grant development staff or, research staff to help with budgets and help with submissions and things like that. And that can be very time consuming and a large learning curve as well. And then also related to that is there could be, at some institutions, there may be few internal grant mentors. So you may not have, a lot of folks in your department that are working on, many external funding opportunities. So you may not, be able to turn to colleagues with, a large successful federal funding or even state or other funding track, record to help provide you guidance. Then, further talking about kind of context is really kind of thinking about, a couple of numbers. And one thing that, that I focus on and that we talk about in kind of, external funding research is that, a 20 to 30% win rate with any, particular funder, whether, today we're going to talk about justice, but whether it's health or other fields, that's considered kind of industry standard, if you will, or, doing really well, and so that really equates to 2 to 3 out of 10. So you may submit you know 9, 10 proposals and be lucky to win 2 or 3 of them. And if you're exceeding that, then that's really and that's great, of course. But just to try to set the stage that there's a lot of competition out there, and I think we've all followed kind of, especially with the federal government, with any administration, there's changes, and that currently there's fewer opportunities, and so fewer opportunities for funding across the criminal justice landscape, if you will, and that in and of itself creates more competition. So, funders are going to be looking for, essentially more effort for less funding opportunities, if you will. So just the competition is going to be, really fierce. And so Finding and writing proposals, this is something to really consider, that finding and writing proposals is really time consuming. And that's going to compete with your teaching, your research, and your service obligations. So really kind of thinking about that initial, kind of contextual issue that you might be facing. Okay, now I was going to talk a little bit about, the criminal justice funding ecosystem. And these are really, and trying to build toward some ideas for, building success through strategic relationships, which is something I really think is essential. And these are just some ideas for some non-federal funding opportunities. And you can look at your, various state criminal justice agencies. You can look at local government departments, regional collaborative initiatives, governors, criminal justice offices. There are several governors that have particular criminal justice initiatives focused on homelessness, opioids, curbing violence, whatever it may be in your particular state. But you can look there. And then also, of course, private and community foundations. So there's a few foundations out there that have been known to fund criminal justice research. Arnold Ventures is one that has for a long time been funding criminal justice research, and so has the MacArthur Foundation. And then kind of talking a little bit about some strategic growth principles that I'm going to focus on throughout this presentation, if you will, is just this idea of kind of, working, starting small, to build capacity with manageable projects, and before you jump right into large federal competitions, to start close to home, to really leverage the local and state relationships that you have, getting to know those partners, getting to know what their needs are, what are their problems, and how can you maybe help provide a solution for them. And that goes hand in hand with creating those relationships, really investing time and connecting, not just with funders and meeting those entities, which is really important to understand, but also I think really on the ground criminal justice agencies and potential, research partners. So I mean, me, for instance, I mean, I'm, regularly kind of trying to touch base with different practitioner associations, from pretrial groups, the probation and parole association, corrections, whatever it might be, to understand what is it that's, that their constituents might be looking for or needing. As well as talking with criminal justice practitioners, talking with really whoever whoever will take the time to talk with me, whether it's DOC researchers or administrators, local pretrial officers, sheriffs, whatever it is, again, to understand what are their needs, and how can we maybe help them fill those needs or answer those challenging questions that they may have. And another, kind of theme throughout this presentation is that this is going to build over time, that, we're going to focus on strengths and an alignment while thinking strategically about future opportunities. Now, with all that said, those same themes are going to apply here to a handful of the major federal funders in the criminal justice landscape. So here, I think, Josh already mentioned that I think this project here is funded by the National Institute of Justice. That's the research arm of the Department of Justice. The Bureau of Justice Statistics, they're the data collectors and they handle statistical analysis for the Department of Justice. Bureau of Justice Assistance, mostly going to handle training and technical assistance to help improve state and local justice systems. So, a real kind of practitioner facing organization, if you will. And of course, OJJDP, focus on juvenile justice. And those are just a couple or a few of the kind of agencies within the Department of Justice and their Office of Justice programs. And so I'd encourage folks to visit the Office of Justice Programs website if you haven't already or don't, but to visit them regularly to kind of understand, again, the problems that they're facing, the solutions that might be needed, and also then strategically to understand kind of their funding tempo and funding cycle, if you will. And then lastly is the National Science Foundation. This is another one not in the Department of Justice, but outside their own entity. And they fund a series of social science research related to criminology, sociology, and law and society that might fit some of your interests as well. But these, again, are meant just to be, as examples and definitely not exhaustive. Okay, now I'm going to switch a little bit, kind of in the weeds a little bit on key funding terminology and trying to understand some essential concepts when you're looking for external funding. And forgive me if this is, redundant for a lot of folks out there, but so I'd like to kind of lay a little bit of kind of landscape when I start using certain terms. But anyway, so you'll hear people talk about RFPs or NOFOs. It seemed like for most of my career up until the last few years, RFPs is what people were always focused on, the request for a proposal. I believe that those should be more aligned with contracts, whereas the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, are typically supposed to be aligned with grants. But either way, both of those are essentially kind of the statement coming from, in this case, the government. It could be the federal or state government, where they announce or lay out exactly what they're looking for. They outline their priorities, the requirements, and the submission procedures. Both of those documents do that. Today, I'll be talking mostly about NOFOs, as they're focused more on grant funding. Then there's a couple of different types of awards. And so grants are probably what people are most familiar with. And grants really, they fund proposed projects and they have a lot of, flexibility for the recipient. You don't have I would say you don't have a lot of agency involvement in day-to-day operations, but maybe some, regular check-ins and ensuring that you're moving forward with the scope of work and that your project stays within scope. But you have a lot of kind of, I would say, intellectual flexibility there to kind of navigate the project as needed. Whereas contracts are different. Here, the government essentially lays out a specific set of services that they're looking for, and that you bid to those services specifically. They're looking to, conduct some very specific type of research, and you lay out exactly how you can meet each one of their aims within that. Then cooperative agreements are what I hear is like either, depending on your perspective, they're either the best or worst of both of those worlds of grant and contract, if you will. So cooperative agreements here, it's a federal government mechanism that includes substantial agency involvement during the project, not just implementation, but throughout the project. The funding agency collaborates closely with you. They provide ongoing guidance and oversight throughout the project. This is different than a grant where, some grants I have talked with the funder at the kickoff, and then maybe again a couple years down the road to kind of let them know exactly where we're at outside of submitting regular progress reports and things like that. Cooperative agreements, which I've worked on several with the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Most of those are cooperative agreements, and you're essentially in meetings with your partner, with your government agency, typically every other week, so every 2 weeks. You'll be talking, you'll update on progress, you'll get direction from how the government may want to handle specific situations that come up or steer the project in a certain way. And so there's just a lot of engagement with those agencies. Me personally, I've had good experiences on those because I think it gives you an opportunity to, build a relationship and build rapport with the funder, and also to really kind of learn again what it is that they're interested in. I mean, what is their main objectives and what's the impact that you're trying to achieve and ensuring that their interests, the problem they want to solve, and the solution that you're moving forward with executing on, that those line up. And so to me, I've had really good experiences, with those. Then one other thing to consider is prime versus subaward. And again, I think many of you may be familiar with this terminology, but just wanted to kind of set a little framing here. So prime is essentially you're the direct recipient of the award, and you hold the primary responsibility for essentially everything, for compliance, reporting, financial management, writing the proposal, that whole thing. Now you're the leader of the project, and so there's some benefit that comes along with that, but there's also more work that comes along with that. You might have many subawardees that you're managing and working through all kinds of responsibilities with. Subawards is just exactly what it sounds like. You're awarded through the prime. You might have a certain kind of finite piece of a certain project to handle. Maybe you're doing the qualitative data collection, or you're you're leading a survey, or you're handling some on-site activities. It could vary, just whatever it is, but there's a certain piece that you're handling. And for me personally, at different points in my career and on different things, different projects, I've liked being either a prime or a subaward. I think maybe as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little lazier, and so I do like subawards. I'm kidding just a little bit, but in general, you don't have to lead the proposal. You don't have to handle a lot of the financial oversight, and you get to do kind of the work, the intellectual work that you want to. But I think there we'll talk about strategy on what makes sense across both of those, depending on the opportunity. Um, okay, now I'm going to lead to some talk a little bit about building a tracking system. And these are just some ideas. I know I say essential elements, but I'll say kind of important elements. Things that I think are important to track. We do this at RTI. I did this at APPA. I've done this throughout my career to track the agency or program, what's being funded, who's the funding source, what are the specific opportunities, deadlines. Is it a rolling deadline? Is it like NSF where they have multiple deadlines per year? Is it a foundation where they're going to have maybe a letter of interest to submit? Then you need to submit a full proposal. Or now with a lot of the OJP awards, you need to kind of file your intent to submit and I think proposed cost through just grants. I think a month before or after on a certain deadline before the proposals due. So understanding all those deadlines, the size of the award, length of time, funding value, eligibility. Is your institution eligible? Do you need partnerships? Whatever it may be. For RTI, we noticed that there's some awards that come out where they're requiring an academic institute to lead the project, and it pushes RTI into, seeking out a subaward opportunity if that's something we want to. So looking at that required partners, understanding indirect cost, and then here's really what I'm gonna focus on with these next two. I think really that's important throughout this talk is really strategic fit. How does this align with your particular interests? I think it's really important to kind of break through that idea of external funding is this idea of just, chasing dollars and chasing grants and those sorts of things. And I understand that funding levels are important and they're important to me as well. But I think what's most important is understanding that they fit your interests, that you have the right idea, that the vision that you have for either yourself, your program, your institution, aligns and it matches up, and that there's some strategy and intentionality behind that along what you're trying to achieve, like the impact that you're trying to make, if you will. But you can use this tracking system, by reviewing it regularly. I have monthly here, but it can be at whatever cadence you want and can have whatever columns and top, specific things that are helpful to you and your team, and review that not just with yourself, but with your team, reviewing that with the folks that you're working with. You can rank opportunities by fit, like how likely is it that this would be something you would bid on? Is this totally out of kind of your vision for yourself or your institute? And again, not just size of the award. Understanding kind of the recurring nature of it, and then essentially just using this as a planning document, if you will, to help you build your pipeline, over time as you move forward, with your research and building your kind of your research team, if you will. I will say one other thing I will say is that sometimes that, awards when they come up annually or it could be that there's certain opportunities that come up annually. And so you may want to know that so you can plan for the next year. Another thing to think about is that you could see that a certain entity won an award and that that it will be recompeted in 3 or 5 years. And it may be that today is not the right time for you to go for it, but in 3 to 5 years, you're gonna work over that time in kind of a capture structure to try to, apply down the road, if you will. So here I just kind of jotted down kind of an example or a sample kind of tracker to help you kind of think through what something like this might look like, where you have the agency, You have, what program it's coming out with, some deadline. You can kind of see some things here, and you have next steps. Maybe you're going to contact a partner or work on a concept or a white paper, schedule a meeting or follow websites. Whatever your specific, next steps might be. I think that this can be a way to kind of, guide you going forward. And I will say, to kind of kind of demonstrate kind of the evolution of my career a little bit. Like early days when I first started this, what I would do is I would even read reports that I was interested in. I was working on a lot of reentry and recidivism research at the time, and so I would just try to find, I'm reading that literature, and I would always look at the abstracts, either in the front or the back, to see who was funding those types of projects. I noticed that, places like the Council of State Governments and some other places that they were getting funded by lots of foundations. And so I would just essentially I kept a Word document back then, a couple decades ago, and I would actually go and just print out the pages from those foundations, read them and try and understand them, and then, try and work to, tracking them and eventually submitting proposals to them over time. So it's this tracking can kind of be however, makes sense for you all. Okay, so here I've talked a little bit about strategy, but I think to me, strategic fit and strategic sense are what really makes sense when you're trying to pursue long-term successful external funding. Right? And you're going to hear me say a lot of times, it's not about a single opportunity, but it's about can you sustain that over time, right? It's not just about one win, but it's about kind of putting those wins together over time, if you will. Um, and so here you can see, I say, not every funding opportunity deserves your time, even if you're technically eligible. I think there's a quote or a statement from Warren Buffett, the multi-billionaire trader, that he says that one of his favorite words has become the word no, that he turns down so many things because he's looking for the very specific thing that is of interest to him and that moves his vision and his mission forward. And so I think, thinking that way as well is going to make a lot of sense, because before you invest weeks, months, your weekends, your nights, your early mornings, whatever it may be, as you're balancing your regular teaching and research schedule to work on a proposal, you want to really evaluate what's important. So here I came up with 7 ideas. These aren't the only ones, but these are just, I think, a few ideas to kind of summarize this. So understand the research agenda alignment. Does the opportunity advance your core research interests, your scholarly trajectory? Or is it a detour? And I think really asking yourself and your team that as you're building these projects. Institutional mission fit. Does the opportunity align with what your university is trying to accomplish? Does it align with your strategic priorities? Does it strengthen your, the state, local, national reputation, if you will? And then do you have the partners ready? Like, are you prepared? Do you have the partnerships in place, or can you develop them in time? Fourth, here's execution capacity. Do you have the resources, team, and infrastructure in hand at the moment to execute on the project you want? That could be a great question to ask yourself if you're thinking if you're in a prime versus subaward context, right? It could be that it's too large. It might be the type of project that has a lot of sub awards in it, and that maybe you don't have the interest or maybe the kind of administrative capacity to pull something like that off, because that can take a lot of work. And then here to just 3 more is realistic timing. And I'm going to talk some strategy about how to handle the timing of these things, because they can come out with often 30 days or something like that to turn them around. But realistic timing, can you develop a competitive proposal by the deadline without compromising quality or your other commitments? I will say this is a hard one, because I know for me and for our teams, very often we will drop a lot of things, a lot of those other commitments to get a proposal done. When it comes time for proposals, and I think this can be part of the kind of the cultural perspective that I would share, is that it's all hands on deck. Hitting those timelines are very important, and this will give you some of the non-glamorous aspects of proposal writing. I mean, I was kind of responding to some proposal stuff over the weekend. I had a call on Friday at 6:30 in the morning about that proposal, and then on Saturday we had a 2 p.m. Saturday deadline. Doesn't happen all the time, or necessarily frequently, but that does happen. So I mean, it's just understanding the realistic time commitment. Uh, and here is another big one, competitor landscape. Who is currently being funded? Does it look like these are people what does the competition look like? And where do you stand competitively? And I think here it's really being objective to really consider your strengths and weaknesses relative to that competitor landscape because you can't be the biggest fish in every pond. And I think understanding that can allow one to be competitive in external funding to be very successful. I mean, I think the first project I ever had was, I think, a $70,000 project at the American Probation and Parole Association. So with indirects and all that stuff, I mean, the money goes quick. Just saying that, like, it was a relatively smaller award for, I think, 2 years of funding. But I was really excited to have that. I mean, I was, of course, no gray hair back then. And so I was much younger, so I was very excited, but I was able to take that and turn that, smaller opportunity into multiple BJA, several $100,000 awards, and kind of lay a foundation of reputation for myself working with that agency. So it's not always going for those big, million or whatever the big dollar awards and competing with folks that have maybe been playing in that sandbox for a long time, and taking lumps that maybe you don't need to. So I think it's just really being open-minded about where you stand as a competitor. And then I think equally important is the funding landscape. Understanding particular fundings, which agencies fund the type of work that you're interested in, which agencies fund the type of work to solve the problems that you're interested in solving. It's what's the right funder for your approach, maybe methodologically. Like I know some, especially foundations, and at times different federal agencies, they move to specific methods. They want random control trials, or they want causal inference, or they want more qualitative work. It just those things can change. And I think really understanding that funding landscape. And I can, share with you that we were working on an opportunity many years ago for the MacArthur Foundation, and I had never worked with them. And they're one of the largest foundations in the country and based out of Chicago. And not only was I reading the NOFO, reading the RFP, but I was on their website all the time. I mean, reading the bios of the staff, understanding kind of their background, looking at the things that they had funded before, the types of things they had worked on. It's just really, again, I was newer at RTI and wanted this win. It was a really big project. And I'm not saying because of that, we did win that bid. But just really understanding your funding landscape to make sure that you're speaking to that agency to solve the types of problems that they're interested in solving. Um, and I think down here I have and I'm sure they'll share these slides can be shared, but just um, this idea about being strategically selective, it's not just about being risk averse. It's really about kind of maximizing your opportunity and maximizing your limited time to focus on where you have the strongest chance of success and impact. Next slide. All right, sorry about that. Make sure. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to talk again, more nuts and bolts about reading a NOFO, whether it's a NOFO, an RFP, whatever it may be, the statement that the funding agency puts out that you're interested. And I think this is really important when it comes to finding federal funding and being successful is decoding. I'm saying federal funding, it could be state, it could be philanthropy, whatever it may be. But this NOFO or RFP is your roadmap to what reviewers are going to prioritize, right? So, in all of these things, any mistake I mention are things that I've been guilty of in the past and probably still do this sometimes. But sometimes I've noticed that folks just skim proposals. You skim an RFP. Well, what needs to happen is you can skim them, but you need to really focus on them. And I can tell you that before I get into all these details, one thing that I'll do with a proposal, with an RFP, is I have young children. I get up really early in the morning to try to beat them. So I beat them out of bed. I mean, to be able to get some work done before they get up. And so what I'll do every morning if I'm working on a proposal is I'll reread the NOFO. You'll find a lot of it's administrative, but there tends to be in a 40, 50 page document, 3 to 6 pages that are really pertinent. And I'll read that every day, maybe multiple times a day. Maybe it's 3 paragraphs, 6 paragraphs, but just really understanding what are the purpose and priorities for this project. What is the problem the agency is trying to solve? You need to go beyond the title and catchphrases. You need to really understand the policy context and the urgency, that this agency is trying to solve, right? And so don't avoid even looking at kind of social context. This is criminal justice, right? So I mean, we exist in a social, we're embedded within a social landscape. So understanding what's going on broader, what's emphasized in there. Are there specific populations? Is it focused on, by age, by sex, by race, by whatever it might be, by particular crime type or drug use, homelessness? Are there particular methodologies mentioned? Is it looking for an RCT or causal inference? Is it mixed methods? Whatever it may be, I would just really pull out all those signals because those are going to be the scoring criteria that reviewers are using. Eligibility, talked about this a little bit. See who can apply, who can lead, those types of things. I mean, those are kind of pragmatic. Are partnerships required? Sometimes they're mandatory. Sometimes agencies have put out one entity can't do this alone. You have to have a prime, but they have to have at least one subaward. So understand that. And then you might even look to where minority serving institutions might be prioritized if there's set-asides or other, kind of, advantages for the MSI designation. And then really focus on the reviewer criteria. How is your proposal going to be scored? Because this section will tell you exactly how reviewers will judge your proposal. Criteria is definitely going to include, if it's a research project or even it's technical assistance, it's going to focus on the design, whether it's the research or the program implementation to the design. It's going to be super important. Team qualifications. Agencies, whether government or philanthropy, I have come to find out they need a team they can trust, right? It's just like, if you hire a contractor to work on your house, you might hire somebody that worked on your neighbor's house that you like the work they did, or somebody that, in your neighborhood that kind of vouches for them and says, oh, call this person. You're really focused on that team, and here too, right? I mean, the government is looking for solutions or a philanthropy, and, they want to know that they have a team that they can trust. And it's the trust to navigate and I should say circumnavigate all the realities of pulling these projects off because they won't necessarily happen exactly like you bid them. Potential impact, of course, feasibility, all those things are going to be important. Pay attention to the point distributions as well. You'll see that there's different scoring criteria for each section. And I'll say more about that on this slide, actually. So some common pitfalls to talk about. And okay, I think here at the bottom I say, and this is actually what I used to do all the time and would not be successful on proposals. So it's I think a common pitfall is you're treating a grant writing project as a purely intellectual product when it actually should be a strategic positioning that combines like your intellectual prowess with your practical ability to pull a project off. So a couple of other things are applying too broadly, submitting to every opportunity out there is going to drain your resources. It's going to burn you out, and it's not going to lead to kind of that strategic competitive advantage you're looking for. Ignoring eligibility criteria. I think that's an easy one to try to work through is just making sure, get somebody else to read the proposal to make sure that you're eligible or what makes the most sense for, moving forward. Okay, the not writing to scoring criteria. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. And the story I'll share with you here is And it goes along with this comment at the bottom. What I used to do all the time writing proposals was I'd get so excited about writing the problem statement and the literature review that in a 30-page proposal, I'd put 15 pages towards it. And that would count for 10 points. So I spent 50% of the pages to try to get 10 points, and I'd probably get 8 or something, you know. So I'm just saying, like, really, that makes no sense, right? I mean, really focus your your page distribution should line up with the points, right? So I mean, on a 30-page proposal, that, you know, problem statement, maybe it's 2, 3, 4 pages, and you're really focusing on where the meat of the points are, really write to those points, if you will. um, Understanding compliance, understand. So this is again administrative, but understanding that large awards are going to call for a lot rigorous reporting, financial oversight, IRB, you know, data management plan. So there could just be more administrative burden. So just kind of understand what you're getting into when you move forward with those. Okay. Good. All right, again, a couple of kind of strategic growth ideas here. Again, these are, you know, ideas not meant to be exhaustive, but I'm a big believer in starting with sub-awards. I'll have sub-awards and starting small. I think it may make a lot of sense. And that's kind of the theme of this whole thing. This slide here is start with sub-awards. You can join established research or practice teams, gain valuable experience, engage with you know, your federal state philanthropic partners, understand budgeting and compliance. You're really, it's on the job learning, and you're getting to do the exact specific type of work that you want to. This fits in line with pursuing smaller grants, especially when you're trying to get your name out there. Whether just in general, if you're, you know, maybe newer, an assistant professor or something, or if it's with a new agency, if you're moving, you know, from, you know, I've done all this work in OJP. If I were to try to move into NIH or something like that, you know, I would look to start really small. So really I think state agencies, local governments make a ton of sense right here, because I think you can really build those relationships and have high impact. Similarly, building partnerships intentionally. I think, again, like I said, starting local is really developing sustained, meaningful relationships. Some ideas here, since it's criminal justice, is courts, corrections departments, the community organizations where you work. I mean, churches and other, you know, civil service providers, if you will, you know, other research or either, you know, colleagues at your own university or local universities, others in your area. I'm here in North Carolina, and there's lots of universities around here, from very large ones to other, you know, smaller ones and regional ones that, you know, we partner with, you know, quite a bit as well. So really, I think building those strong partnerships and really creating kind of a larger team kind of atmosphere, not just internal to your university, but externally as well. Um, Similar to the starting small, look for pilot studies. Are there, you know, some pilot opportunities to look for some seed funding? I know Arnold Foundation, I have several colleagues that are working on, I think it's less than $100,000 projects that they call them, I think, they're called planning grants. And they're able to kind of work with agencies to see if a full study is feasible. And I think they're typically 12 to 18 months. And it's about, can you collect the data? What data are there? Can you analyze the data? So, you know, those sorts of things. I'm just trying to watch the time. I'll speed up here. I think I'm running out of time. So develop so here I have the idea of you may want to consider working to develop you know, a 2-year funding plan. It could be 2 years, kind of arbitrary. It could be a 3-year, 5-year, whatever it is, a multi-year plan where you're looking to build your capacity, establishing those relationships. You're moving forward, submitting some projects, either grant pilots or small projects. You're saying, hey, within a year, we're going to submit 1 or 2 project proposals to a state or a foundation or federal government, whatever it may be. Work your way up to a larger, you know, federal partnership. I'm just saying there's a few kind of more specific ideas here as well, but just really kind of lay out some metrics that you're trying to work towards. and try to get, yourself and your team to be accountable to them, to say like, hey, it's been a year. How many things did we submit? Did we go beyond the two, or did we not make one? Why not? Why or why not? And what do we need to change next year? And then, in year two, you build on that. Maybe, and again, maybe it's year three, whatever that might be, but you're just building kind of strategically here. You're thinking of, now, are you going to lead your first, prime as an NIJ or NSF, BJS, whatever it may be, and you're going to convert those year one pilot findings into a competitive full proposal. You're going to continue to expand that partnership from now, not just your local, your location, your county or your state, but multi-state, multi-county, multi-institutions. You're building these collaborative teams. You're going to national conferences. You're strengthening your dissemination and policy engagement plans with concrete partnerships. And so this one here, you're publishing papers, you're writing essays, or I think nowadays there's a lot of new ways to disseminate. When I was coming up, it was mostly you need to do peer review and some in-person conferences. I mean, now there's a lot of ways to be visible. So think about how you can do that, and demonstrating your university and institutional readiness through those year one kind of activities that you've already gone through as a sub award or smaller awards or whatever the case may be. Okay, so um, I think I'm down to the last couple of slides here. So, funding, like I said, is a long game. It's not a single win. It's really, to me, it's cultural. And it's that the grant funding landscape, essentially rewards persistence and strategic positioning over time and not overnight success. Now, I'm sure there's overnight successes out there. I don't think that it's very common. It definitely wasn't my experience. And I think that just understanding kind of the reality of this project, of this process, can help prepare you for what will be, most likely some rejections and losses and setbacks, if you will. And just, I think remembering something I say all the time is that not all strong, not all good proposals get funded, right? Review panels, they have to make difficult choices. They may get lots of really good proposals and they can only fund one. And that so funding decisions may just reflect that portfolio balance, not your proposal quality. Uh, and not all funded proposals are exceptional. Sometimes timing, strategic fit, unique partnerships, whatever it may be, results in a proposal getting funded. I can remember um, a colleague of mine had won a proposal, a very large project, and their reviews, you would have thought that they had been rejected. There was a lot of, critique, if you will. So it's just, understanding that it can be difficult that way. Again, win rates are low, competition is intense, and it may take, time before you start, actually winning. So a lot of that stuff is out of your control. But what I like to say is what's in your control is the quality and clarity of your proposal, which includes your team, strategic fit, your intention, all of those things, I think, are things that you control, along with your consistency and professionalism in your proposals, the strength of your partners and your team. All of that you control. You don't control how reviewers are going to score you. You don't control on what your competition may be. Oh, sorry about that. So strong proposals further, they build credibility, even if they don't get funded. Program officers, whether in the government or foundations, they will remember those proposals. This has happened. We've lost projects with different, foundations, especially, but made a really good impression with good proposals, and they contact us to submit something again that we were able to win on. So your unfunded proposal today, often becomes the foundation of your funded proposal tomorrow. You might be able to rework that. That rejection is feedback. It's not a verdict on the quality of you as a researcher, any of us as a researcher. It's a statement about kind of the comparative success of that proposal and how you can fix it going forward. I'm going to just move us along here a little bit. So I think I'm approaching time. So again, I think this will kind of be our last slides, just to kind of think through some core principles to guide your journey. And it really focuses on, just reiterates what we talked about, is that funding is structured. It's not random. There are patterns and priorities and cycles in the funding landscape that you can know and that you can educate yourself on. You can anticipate them. You can position yourself strategically within them. Be prepared. Strategy beats volume. Intentional alignment with funding priorities is more powerful than submitting a whole bunch of proposals every, right? That quality and fit matter more than quantity. Um, Unfortunately, rejection is normal. Believe me, I've had many proposals that have been rejected, but declined proposals, like I was just saying, are feedback, right? Every experienced researcher is going to face these rejections, and this helps you to build capacity over time. Mhm. And just, your ideas matter. You belong in the competition, and you have a lot of community connections. Your institutional perspective matters. So I think that this is an opportunity for you to move forward, with your proposal. Okay, that's the end.
All
Hi,
right. Thank
Josh.
you so much, Dr. DeMichele, for that really useful talk. We do have time for questions and answers. If you still have a question and you have not yet entered and not yet submitted it, just go to the box and submit it, and we will get to it. But before we turn to the Q&A, I'm just going to turn things back over to Dr. Kapajan for a second.
Thank you, Josh. Before we go to the Q&A, one quick plug. We have paired this speaker series with what we're calling the Proposal Development Playbook, which is a recorded companion sessions designed to supplement these talks. The idea is simple. You come to the live sessions for the big picture, and then you use the playbook modules for tools, templates, and workflows that you can apply to your proposal. These modules are recorded and are intentionally placed between the live talks so that you can keep the momentum going. Session 1 of the playbook is now available on our YouTube channel. It introduces the very early stages of the proposal development with a focus on the administrative groundwork needed before submission. Session 2, which will be available today, covers the proposal submission and tracking, including the mechanics of submitting to a major federal funding portal such as grant.gov, research.gov, and just grants. Now I'll turn it back to you, Josh and Matthew, for the Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Joel. Dr. DeMichele, we have some questions. The first question is, the questioner is asking about cooperative agreements, that they heard that they may be challenging because they involve the direct contact with the funder. And they're wondering if this makes the recipient more vulnerable to shifting priorities or expectations. They ask, how true is that in your experience? And are there any best practices for managing that relationship most effectively?
Uh, yeah, that's definitely true. And that things can shift as you're working on a cooperative agreement. They're, like I was saying, cooperative agreements can be the best and worst of the funding world, right? I've had good experiences in general working with BJ and BJS on cooperative agreements, but if it's just between us here, I mean, yeah, sometimes it gets frustrating, because things are shifting a lot. Sometimes it's very helpful. You're getting real insight from the funder as well. You're learning what they're interested in. And, of course, if it's at a time where they're at the state, the local, the federal level where, administrations are shifting, priorities may shift as well. I can tell you that I think I've been lucky in that the folks I've worked with in those entities, it hasn't been troublesome. It's a shifting landscape that you don't always get to do what you want, like on a grant. Now, I have colleagues that I have heard talk about some, let's say persnickety policy officers or program officers, if you will, that aren't quite as open-minded. So, It's, it's kind of a little bit of how you take it when you're working on. But I'd say as far as a strategy, I don't know that I have any, best practices particularly other than to, um, understand that, you are working for that entity, right? If BJS is funding my work, I mean, I am working for them. I mean, they are my client. I mean, we're going to be treated respectfully and all that stuff. But if they're looking for something different, then it is for me to try to figure out how to help them do that to some extent, without maybe contorting myself too much. So I think perspective, it as well makes sense and kind of inform that relationship with them so that those things don't come out of the dark, that you don't want it all of a sudden you're getting, hit with some whole new left turn, so to speak. Because as a program officer, they don't want that either. They want to be successful as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually right. Just talking from my own personal experience, I think it's very similar to yours. I've always enjoyed the cooperative agreements because you get that extra feedback. There's no surprises just because the communication is constant. The one negative, just to be honest, is just the increase in time, right? Just because
Yep.
it is those regular meetings. But overall, I found it, mostly positive by far.
They keep you on track too. I mean, it's a little frustrating because sometimes you'll have weekly or bi-weekly meetings, so you're looking for progress in a short period of time. Um, and that can be good and bad too, right? If you're if you have time in a week or 2 week to make progress, it's great, it looks good, but you don't always. I mean, we all know, like I said, we're all juggling multiple priorities here.
So true, so true. So the second question asks, what are the biggest warning signs under execution capacity that might tell you that maybe it's not a good time to submit or to move forward for that opportunity?
I think here, if you don't have, for instance, I mean, if they're trying to set up some kind of a large center that's going to have a lot of pass-through funding that maybe if let's say you win that, RTI wins the project and now we're running a large center and we need to, fund, 20 other entities through an RFP process, or there's a lot of subcontracts involved, all of those things are going to be, and you don't have a big organization or entity, that's going to be hard to pull off. So I would probably just recognize that if you don't have the support administratively.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Um, Third question asks about the strategic filters that you discussed.
Mhm.
What would you say is the most commonly overlooked, especially by early career faculty?
Hmm. That's a good question. The questioner is challenging my remembering all seven right off the bat, too. Um, well, I think well, here's what I think is the hardest thing for people. I think especially, and again, I don't have data particularly on this. I think especially younger career is you're ready to swing the bat and you think that you can, play in any game. And that's a way of saying that you're kind of biting off more than you can chew and that you're ready to hop into every proposal and just see what sticks instead of focusing really particularly on things that are within your lane, if you will. And so it's really about, I think, myself and I've seen others that like really understanding your own limitations. And I would say a couple of things in the weeds. Another thing I think, and I don't know if it's just early career, but I think waiting too late to begin a proposal, if we want to talk about simple stuff, if you have a research idea and you're waiting until the perfect funding comes out to start that, you're going to be behind the ball on that. You need to be, like I said, I'm constantly talking with partners, practitioners, associations, other folks, to be prepared for what is to come. So kind of softly lining up teams, if I will. So I'd say being realistic about your skills and waiting too late are a couple of things that I think people tend to put off.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point that you said where some people are just looking for that perfect fit. I think in some cases, like you said, it's definitely a balancing act because especially from MSIs and other schools where the teaching load is so high in many cases, combined with service and everything else, where it really is a huge time commitment. So you definitely don't want to overextend yourself. But one thing, maybe not so much with junior faculty, but with those maybe more recently tenured, is sometimes people are just looking for exactly what they're studying right now, right? Where sometimes you just have to be able to pivot, not to a completely different field, but if it's somewhat adjacent to what you're doing.
Right.
So maybe it's not the same substantively or methodologically, but you have the methodological skills. You could apply that to maybe something that you haven't necessarily always studied before, right? So just being able, and I think you touched upon it in many places in your presentation today, just being open to those opportunities and being able to seize them when they arise. I
Yeah,
think
and
is
that's where
important to have
the
some.
pilot studies come up, small awards come up. Being like I said, a sub award makes a ton of sense to kind of to try new things, but doing it kind of intentionally, I think makes a ton of sense. For me, not being at a university, and Josh, we've talked about this. I mean, I have a broad kind of topical sphere, from community corrections to terrorism studies. And that, I mean, that's my full-time job. I don't have teaching requirements or service requirements and things like that.
Great
I
point.
actually have a question about kind of related to everything we've been talking about, which is, that we've been thinking about these filters and thinking about execution capacity for one grant, but oftentimes we are applying to two, perhaps three grants in a year. And how do you think about those filters cumulatively? Because sure, if you just if you have the same success rate as average, you're gonna get one of those three. But it may be that you get two, or it
Mhm.
may be that you get all three.
Mhm.
And how do you think? Do you think about potentially what those scenarios might look like when you're applying to multiple grants?
So yes, we do. I mean, I think from a university perspective, maybe slightly different, but on my side with the team I have, what it will do is yeah, so let's say in that specific example, we're applying to two or three. We think, okay, we know we're going to win this one, or we've got a really good shot on this one. These other two were, what are we going to do if we win those two? So we do strategize at that phase about how would we shift staff around on the project. And we might, even at that, and we have done this at times, is we will start kind of a contingency hiring phase, right, to put out some applications to say contingent upon award, we would hire such a person. And we've actually carried out interviews and things like that to have people teed up if it were to happen. Now, probably you and Josh are better at kind of understanding to translate that to the university world, but it might be that you're thinking of, would there be a postdoc hiring opportunity? Would you put out assistant prof position? Would you take on more grad students? Or could you at a university, I mean, especially I think very often as an outsider looking in, I see universities as this wealth of kind of untapped potential and that like the cohesion of working across, and I know it's easier said than done, of working across social crim or whatever it is to econ and public policy and those sorts of things. Would there be conversations you could have with other faculty before those awards come in, even is that's some of the stuff we do. Yeah. But hey, good problem to have, right? If I mean, I like that. I like the way you're thinking that the big problem is we've done too good. Yeah. Yeah.
Positive mindset,
Yeah,
positive
there you
mindset.
go. Yeah, summer money.
Yeah, actually, just before we turn to the next question, I just want to, reiterate, emphasize what you said before at the outset, which I think is really important, especially for junior faculty, that 30% is really a hit rate is really phenomenal, which
Yeah.
means, that a rock star, the rock star is getting rejected 70% of the time, right? I mean,
Yep.
I just don't think a lot of people realize that rejections, just like submitting to journals, like rejections are usually much more common than acceptances.
Oh, I know. Yep.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I do think it's really important to understand that, that just and I think it's to be prepared for that. It's easier. And look, I get sad. Look, I lose. I don't like it, but I think really being able to use that feedback to understand, can you turn it around? Is it a different proposal down the road? And then see what did get funded. I mean, we'll do that, especially, with the federal government, they post them. So I think there's ways to learn from it.
Yeah, and again, just to kind of like piggyback over something else that you had in your slides that I thought was really terrific, on this exact point that this rejected proposal in the future will become the funded project. Um,
Very, very, very well might, right? I mean, we do that all the time. We take proposals that don't get funded one year. We try to see if we can, revise them based on feedback, based on changes at the agency, whatever it may be, to submit. And then you go, oh, well, we have a proposal that's halfway there and move that way.
yeah, and I think that they would, there's been research, like NSF did research on this, that the number one predictor of funded projects for NSF is that you submitted a previous proposal in the area.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
NIJ, actually, I think they still do this. Well, they haven't done it recently, but because there haven't been RFPs, but they had a system in place where if you were resubmitting a proposal that was rejected, you got to write like a two-page cover letter in addition
Oh,
to the actual proposal explaining how you responded
hmm.
to the earlier critiques, which we did a couple of times, and one of which we got funded. So I think it's just an illustration of your point, not
Hmm.
to be discouraged, but that if you get rejected, you can, take a look systematically at the comments, respond to it, and then just improve the proposal moving forward.
That's right.
And I think that underlines what we were talking about on the last session, that, grant writing is a skill. And like any skill, it can only be developed through trial and failure and
Hmm.
learning from that failure. And I think having that mindset and understanding that that's what's going to happen and that's what's going to take you to that funded project
Hmm.
makes the process easier to digest, I think.
That's right. Yeah, I think the skill part is so important because, like I said somewhere in there, that I used to think that it was my time to demonstrate how intellectual I was, that I really knew the area and I knew and then you realize you spent all this space and you're not even getting to like what are you going to do? How are you going to help us answer, solve our problem? So,
It's a point very well taken. So we do have a couple of more questions, Dr. DeMichele.
oh,
The next question asks that you mentioned that many people treat grant, and this kind of actually piggybacks to what we're
oh.
talking about right now, that many people treat grant writing as a purely intellectual work rather than a strategic positioning plus the execution. So the person asked, what would that shift in mindset look like in practice when the team is actually sitting down, preparing, writing, and submitting the proposal?
Okay, now I'm going to tell you what I've done. I don't always do it anymore, but I would go ahead and write that thing. I would write that intellectual piece, and kind of get it out. I'd write the too long of document, and then I would go through. We would pair it. Actually, I had a colleague, and she would always like delete my first 3 pages or something like that. It was just like we just knew that was kind of the process. And I'm not telling you that it's efficient. I would say nowadays, to be more efficient, to recognize that I mean, to realize, especially if it's federal or state money, I mean, these are taxpayer dollars. This is not free money. This is not, a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. This is the money that all of us are paying towards taxes or from our taxes. And we want to make sure that what we're doing is impactful. And so it's summarizing. I think it's about another thing I think about is how would I summarize this research field and this problem to like a smart or educated friend or family member of mine. And I wouldn't take them through all the details of regression, assumptions, and all these other details. I would talk to them about the realities of like what things mean and how might you go and talk with a cop or a judge or a prison warden? How would you talk to them about it, right? And I think if you can summarize it in a way that's clear and cogent and summarizes what's the problem that we're facing on a particular issue, and then it allows you to spend the bulk of your time saying like, and here's a solution. And then you move from solution to here's our capacity to like we understand what's going on. We have a clear-eyed way to solve that problem, and we're the team to do it. And you can trust us to do it. And I think that's a huge part because uh, look, I mean, we've all, I know Josh, you and Joel, and I'm sure others on the screen here have written proposals. Like when you do projects, they don't always happen exactly like it's been detailed on paper the year before you're writing them. So they want that team that knows how to navigate the real world and solving real world problems. We're not running around with the Hadron Collider or whatever it is, or some biology study in a lab. We're out there working with people and trying to solve problems that people are facing. And many of you on here may be working on opioid addiction, overdose deaths, homelessness, violent crime. I mean, these are hard, thorny problems, right? And so you need teams in there that can navigate multiple worlds. Because when you show up to talk to a judge, you can't talk to him or her the way you might go and talk at an academic conference. So I think it's moving towards balancing kind of that language where you're getting to the problem, I think is really important, how you're going to solve that problem.
Really
Can
great
I chime
feedback.
can I chime in here a little bit? Because I feel like this is such an important, your
Yeah.
answer, Matthew, is gold. Because so often I read either proposals or papers where they discuss what the paper is about, they discuss what they want to do or the proposal, but there's no actual link to a real problem in the real world that people can understand tangibly what this means, right? It is such an important part of a proposal to connect the question to an actual problem, right? And that's just not done that often. One of my favorite things to do in order to do that is that in the introduction, I think what I like to always start with like a case, like an actual problem, that's something that is well known that happened in real life, and that it just like essentially it describes exactly what the problem is, and that's kind of like my starting point. So to connect all the rest of the proposal to that, but it's so important.
Yeah, because I think you can get lost in the weeds. And I always,
Mhm.
try to tell people a lot of times that I work with, I'm like, you know, I don't need to know everything about climate change. What I need to know is where do I put my garbage when I'm done with it?
Mhm.
And I give you an example. At RTI, we have about 5,000 folks that work there. Most of them are researchers or scientists in some way. They put up trash, different bins with different colors for waste, recycle, landfill, whatever. That didn't work because we couldn't figure it out. They had to come back and put up great big pictures of exactly goes in which bin, right? And so it's like I need a solution. And I think that's what judges are looking, well, maybe not judges, but that's what like prison wardens, cops, and other folks are looking for, to your point, is like being practical. How does that theory translate into real world? But
Yeah, I think that's right. Like just in the work that we've done, and again, just this, you touched upon this multiple times, Matthew, but just connecting your actual proposal to the RFP, that you're actually filling the need.
yeah,
Even quoting in some cases from the RFP itself, just to demonstrate, here's what you listed as your top priority, and here's how we're going to address it.
yeah, yeah. And you still may not win. I mean, I wasn't joking when I say I read those no votes over and over again. I do. I go back to them, because then I always miss something. It seems like.
Yeah, I mean, again, just that point about not winning, it just reinforces what we were talking about before, that even in the best of times, you're going to lose 70%. You never
Right.
know what's going on. There could be funding issues with the funder. There could be a last minute change in priority, that happened after the RFP went out. So that's what I really liked, where you listed what's under your control, because there's some things that you just don't have control over as an
Yeah,
applicant.
that's right. And as a father of small children, I know all about not having control. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, yeah, but you can control some things, and so that's all we can focus on. Yeah, yeah.
So we do have an additional question that came in, and it's asking Dr. DeMichele, have you ever listed consultants on your grants? If so, how have those interactions been working with the grant funder? What are the expectations of the grant funder of the consultants? And then they have a follow-up, but I guess we'll stop here for now.
Yeah, I've used tons of I mean, consultants regularly, very often. I mean, Josh, I think you're a consultant on one of our projects, so we had done. I mean, no, I think so. The way I kind of approach that is I think the types of proposals I've been trying to work on is again focus on solutions that help the government or foundation, whomever, achieve the goal that they're looking for and get their solution. I typically recognize that I or one other person can't do that alone, so I'm looking to build teams. And I see those teams as each either company or individual is filling gaps on a team. What does each person bring? And that's what they're going to be responsible for doing. So it's essentially giving everybody a finite roles, responsibilities, and providing them the resources and the ability to be able to execute on those. So I think I've actually had good feedback on several times when you get consultants because you're getting, if you're getting the right consultants and team members, I kind of just I think of consultants as team members, as you're putting everybody on the squad, right? And everybody's got to, essentially excel at the thing that they're doing. And I find that funders, my experience is that folks like that. I mean, I think you can run into some issue if it's a real small award, you've got everybody gets 20 hours a month or something like that. That's a problem. But you're giving real roles and tasks to people. It demonstrates that you're taking, I think if you do it right, you can demonstrate that you're taking all the deliverables, all the tasks, every piece of the project very seriously. And you've thought that through at the proposal phase. So I think, and I will say, I know OJP has pretty clear guidelines on consultants and pay structures and things like that. NSF, I'm less familiar with.
Yeah, I think all of that is right. So we do have a second question from this person, which is a follow-up. So again, sticking with consultants, with working relationships being quite expansive, if the consultant is internationally based, does that invite any barriers in getting them involved or even in being awarded the grant?
Yeah, you're going to need to check the eligibility criteria per opportunity. Foundations, for the most part, no, especially if a U.S. entity is the prime. OJP, it's my understanding, it used to be that you had to have a U.S. prime. And we have partnered with some foreign teams on OJP proposals. They're subs and have not had a problem. I don't know if those rules have changed and how those rules function across kind of the federal and state landscape. So I would just check those. I would just say practically the thing you run into is kind of time zone stuff. If you're prepared to, like we had a partner in India, and that was, she was always on at like 10 at night or 3 in the morning or something. We tried and to kind of work on it, but yeah, I would look at the regs, the regulations on whatever you're applying to on that. But I would assume that any U.S. government funded opportunity is going to need a U.S. Company to lead it.
That's right. Yeah, that's always
Yeah.
been my experience.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think we'll stop here since we're getting close to the end. But thank you again, Dr. DeMichele, for the terrific talk. We also, again, want to thank NIJ for their support, which made today possible. Just a couple of brief reminders before we break. Again, for those of you online now, please complete the brief post-event survey. Again, our goal is just to get feedback so that we can enhance and improve our future events and talks. And we definitely appreciate you taking the time to fill the survey out. A quick reminder that our next session is going to be on March 26th, also from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. This will be the third in the series, and this will be hosting Dr. Eric Pisa from Northeastern University, and he will be talking about formulating strong and impactful research questions. Please do spread the word to your colleagues and networks. Again, we want to thank everybody for taking the time for coming to today's talk. We're very excited about the mission, and we look forward to future speakers and events. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.